Oh, hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. So, today's video, drama alert. I say everybody. I've already seen that No Nats 1 has done a response video, and I am also doing a response video about Talking 20, Cody, quitting Pathfinder 2, which is a real shame because I just it genuinely saddens me. And the reason it saddens me is kind of twofold. One is very simple and very straightforward. When you've got a big YouTube channel, I haven't, all right? But when you've got a really big YouTube channel, you do have to be kind of careful what you talk about and what you say, because he's got like 255,000 followers, and a lot of them probably take him very seriously. I watch him all the time. I love him. So I was really shocked when the video came up in my feed, and I obviously have a vested interest in Pathfinder 2e because I really enjoy Pathfinder 1 and I am really enjoying Pathfinder 2. So for him to kind of come out so strongly and make this kind of big drama video about why he's quitting it and, why he's kind of, not going to play it anymore and kind of move on and play other games, probably 5e, it was quite a shock, especially because he made some quite striking statements. And everyone's entitled to an opinion, and I think that's really important to start. And he definitely did a really good job at the start of prefacing it by saying, hey, look, this is just me. This is where I'm at. And I genuinely get the feeling it probably came from a negative place. He probably wasn't in his usual very positive headspace. His content is very fair and very balanced, and based on his experience, of which he has a lot. And I think that's an important preface to this video. I haven't watched No Nat's video on it yet. I hope I'm saying that right. Forgive me if I'm not. But I am going to watch it because I'm very interested to see what he has to say, because he's another really big Pathfinder 2 guy on YouTube. I'm not. Very small channel. And this is in no way a drama video to kind of boost views on my channel at all. It's really just a kind of I suppose, my quick take on it from a perspective of some of the stuff that he said I had to really disagree with. And one of the statements he makes, it's about kind of 14, 15 minutes in, is you can't and won't roleplay in Pathfinder 2, which is a really weird statement to make, really odd, and kind of sad, because the kind of the evidence that he goes straight to for this is why you will never roleplay in Pathfinder 2e is the quoting of the rule about influencing NPCs. And it takes a minute, and it's a DC set by the GM, and you roll a diplomacy check, and you can adjust the NPC's attitude. And I kind of did a double take, because that rule exists in 5e. If you look under charisma checks and persuasion checks specifically, I'm pretty sure it's like page 179 of the 5e player's handbook. The exact same rule exists in 5e, and it existed in 3.5 D&D, and Pathfinder 1 has rules for influencing NPCs, and they even have rules in 5e and in 2e for Pathfinder, and in D&D 3.5, and pretty much most RPG games for influencing people with a dice roll. And the reason that rule exists is because not everybody is comfortable role-playing. And this notion that a game system should expect and demand that everyone who sits at the table should be happy to invest in a silly voice and be like, my character walks into the bar and says, "You barman, I demand that you give me a free beer," and expect that is going to carry the weight and convince a GM, because they've used a silly voice and they've said some kind of literally carried out some verbal back and forth role play, that should somehow influence outcomes explicitly and without a roll. Whereas other players who might not be comfortable enough or confident enough to do that can't do it. So that, I think, for me, was the point where he lost me. And like I said, I genuinely like his channel. I watch it all the time. He's done many good videos and has many valid points. But when he got that far into the video, he doubled down on something that isn't true or fair, or accurate or correct. And I was quite surprised that he chose to kind of push the buttons that far, and kind of go that hard in a way that just isn't true. I played 2E and all of my players role play, and sometimes they don't, because sometimes everyone feels comfortable role playing and they have a good idea on where they're at with their character and where the NPC's at, and there's a bit of banter and a bit of back and forth between me and my players, and sometimes there isn't because it's not needed or warranted, or they're just not in the right kind of mindset, and they'd rather fall back on a dice roll and let the dice roll and their good skills, which is why you have skills, decide certain outcomes. And sometimes there's back and forth even on that, where they do a bit of good role play, and I just, as a DM, chalk up a little, bonus on the roll, and I'll be like, oh, I have +1 on your roll, or I have +2 on your roll because you did a good bit of role play, and that will weigh it slightly more in their favour, and on it goes. But to really double down and feel that you can justify making a really wildly untrue statement of, if you play Pathfinder 2E, you won't roleplay and the DM will never talk in the first person. The DM will never talk in the first person. The DM who DMs Pathfinder 2E will never roleplay, and neither will his players, is a really heavy-handed and quite negative kind of comment to make about role-playing games in general. I'm not a fan of 5e. I really like the setting, and I really like, some of the rules they have. I love advantage, disadvantage. That's such a really simple, cool mechanic to throw into a game. However, I don't particularly like how it handles player skills, and the way that it doesn't have a huge focus on that. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't bother me. I've played 5e, and I have enjoyed it, and funnily enough, I have also been able to roleplay in 5e, despite there being a persuasion check based on charisma for influencing an NPC, which means technically I don't have to. I can roll a dice and let that decide the outcome. So I suppose this is really kind of a talking point about our responsibility as kind of gamers and also then YouTubers, because I talk about stuff that you can do in your games in my videos quite a lot. But I always preface it by saying, do what you want to do. It's your game, you decide. And even in, the D&D 5e rulebooks and the Pathfinder 2 rulebook and even the Pathfinder 1 rulebook and most role-playing games, there will be statements and caveats that will say, use the rules you like and lose the rules you don't like. I'm pretty sure that's almost verbatim what it actually says in the Pathfinder 2 book when they're talking about kind of, using the rules. So I never make, I would never do a video where I say, don't play 5e because there's no skills and you can't use skills, because I know it's not true. And it's a really hard-line extremist view of one of my small niggles with 5e. But 5e is a perfectly good system. It plays perfectly fine. And you can run and do lots of things in 5e, just like you can in Pathfinder 1 and Pathfinder 2e. And there's this tribalism that we all fall foul of in the current climate especially. You don't have to look at the American elections or Brexit in the UK. And pretty much any major country in the world right now, Xbox and PS, Xbox X or whatever it's called, and PlayStation 5, and then obviously the PC Master Race. We're talking about tribalism. So I think really kind of thumping out a video where you kind of get into a position where you really push down on tribalism in a community where we're all gamers, because we are. We all enjoy roleplay games, which makes us part of a roleplay game community, be that, 5 Torches Deep or Starfinder or any of the Star Wars RPGs, or just any of the RPGs that are out there, because there's bloody loads, let's be honest. And to kind of go, right, I'm quitting this one because it has these features that are completely anathema to role-playing. And, you know, it's a really dangerous kind of line to take, because you're then in a position where you've kind of boxed yourself in. And I think it's a shame that Cody, at that point in the video, boxed himself in so hard and left himself no position to kind of wriggle. I mean, even Paizo have actually officially commented on the video and been like, you know, we're really sorry, but we're not going to, you know, shun you or shunt you out. You know, we're not going to close the door on you, and we're going to keep talking to you. And we're sorry that this is the kind of the feeling you have about the system. But, you know, they kind of essentially, I suppose, hint at perhaps they disagree quite strongly with him, because, like I said, he genuinely states that the DM will never talk in the first person, and no one will roleplay playing Pathfinder 2e. Now, I'm running a Pathfinder 2e game right now, and it's based in Roman Britain, to be nerdy, AD 59, just before the Boudica Rebellion. And last night, we did a roleplay session where they sat down with Gaius Paulinus Suetonius, the Legate Augusta of Roman Britain, historically accurate, by the way, at that time, who I voiced as, I don't know if you have seen the movie The Godfather, but it stars Marlon Brando as the Godfather, and he talks like this, and he's got a very particular way of speaking. And so I did the voice. Now that right there is me talking in the first person and role-playing whilst playing Pathfinder 2e. So guess what? You know, debunked. Just right there and then. Did I ask my players to do lots of excessive role-play? No, because you don't want to bog people down and make them role-play if they don't want to, but you can dangle a carrot. And so, you know, Dave and Mike, the two guys that I was gaming with, I asked them to make some rolls and proffered the opportunity. And there was a couple of bits where, you know, Mike talked really kind of well and picked some good skills and threw down some good skill checks to kind of keep things moving forward. But again, he was aware that he didn't want to kind of bog it down or drag it on. And Dave did a fantastic job because he rolled low on a kind of a bit of a kind of a pressure check about, ironically, talking about the weather. And he rolled low. And instead of just arbitrarily accepting that a low roll means failure, he very cleverly and very deftly as a player instantly kind of switched it up and was just like, well, my character, you know, he didn't actually say this, but this was the gist of it. He realized that he's the non-Roman. So everyone else in the room are Romans, and he's a Breton. He's a local of Britannia, a member of the Cantiasi tribe near Canterbury. And so he kind of goes, oh, actually, so my low dice roll is me forgetting any kind of, you know, suppose like preambles of pretending to be a Roman, and I'm going to be like coarse and vulgar in my speech, and I'm going to be un-Roman, and I'm going to be very, you know, Celtic in how I speak about the weather to the legate. And I really appreciate that as a GM, because that's kind of a very clever way of looking at a skill check and saying, well, just because I rolled low doesn't mean I've arbitrarily failed something because of X and Y. It just means that I'm putting this spin on it. And as the GM, I took that on board, and I thought, yeah, I really like that. That really works. Because there'd been this whole back and forth about Romanizing himself to make himself palatable to the other Romans so that he can move himself forward. And as a Celt, as a proud Celt, why should he? And that right therein is someone thinking in the first person, thinking characterfully and role-playing out a dice roll. So again, this notion that you can't role-play and roll dice, you can, and you should. You know, you shouldn't have to feel the pressure of the Matt Mercer effect, because he's an incredibly talented guy, Matt Mercer. Let's be brutally honest about this. I think a lot of the reason he gets a lot of flame in general to talk about kind of other topics when we talk about these kind of YouTube influencers, and Matt Mercer's name does get mentioned, he's successful because he's good. And I think maybe that irks a lot of people. But he's a professional voice actor. He's professionally trained actor, full stop. I've listened to him talk at length about his background and his career on podcasts. And he's genuinely a really capable, really educated, talented guy. So he, as a voice actor, can do these brilliant dialogues. And the people that he games with, hey, guess what? They're voice actors, and they can do that and emote that and put those performances on that make that show so, Critical Role works so well in that format, because you get a really enriched, like turn it up to 11 experience of what a role-playing game can do if everybody at the table is comfortable doing that. But Matt Mercer has said many times that the game is ours and it is our table's game, and that he isn't there to tell anyone else how to game. He's there to show what you can do, and if you want to do it a different way and you're happy and comfortable with that, he always says go and do it. And again, this is kind of me saying the same thing. I think my real take on this is that we should always try and keep our content positive, because there's enough negativity in the world, and this isn't a negative video because this is me trying to kind of put a positive spin on it. And B, we should be, I suppose, trying to kind of figure out ways of doing things. One of the things Cody mentions in his video is it's very clear, reading between the lines, that maybe he and his party of gamers that he games with and enjoys gaming with genuinely didn't enjoy the ashes of whatever it's called, Adventure Path, for Pathfinder 2e. Now, my first thought there is, don't play the adventure paths, homebrew. And the reason why, when you look at Wizards of the Coast, when they talk about, like, it's very clear that from official Wizards kind of surveys, talking 5e, that the bulk of people engaged with 5e, and I think this is probably true universally for role-playing games, homebrew. Now, maybe they borrow stuff from their favourite TV shows. Maybe they borrow stuff from their favourite movies. Maybe they borrow stuff from actual adventure paths. But the majority of people seem to be, in terms of responses to surveys, saying they do the majority of stuff homebrew. And the reason why I think homebrew is so important, and probably a really good thing for Cody to kind of go away and do, is because he then, as the GM, is completely in control of everything. He talked about how he had his first TPK, his first total party kill, in 22 years of his gaming kind of life, playing a kind of the Age of Ashes adventure path, and it's never happened before, and it clearly bothered him. And like that again really struck me as probably where that video came from. It probably came from a very emotionally raw experience that he attributed a lot of to Pathfinder 2, as opposed to the inevitable, you're the GM in the driving seat and you can control your dice rolls if there is a crisis happening that you want to stop. And because the buck stops with the GM. I've said this statement before. It's like being the goalkeeper. The session wins and loses on how many balls you let in and how many balls you stop. And that element of things is a factor in that. So I think from a perspective of role-playing games are creative spaces where we can be creative with our characters, we can be creative with our backstories, and we can be creative at the table with our combined world-building experience that we do together as groups. So I think from a positive spin on this, I think homebrewing means that he would have had total control on the encounters that he put in front of his party, so that he could tailor them and balance them as he saw fit, not how a third-party author saw fit when he wrote an adventure path, because it's a very different experience. He talks about the necessity for being optimized and optimal, and players will tunnel vision in on the most powerful OP character they can build. And I think, and I've heard this a lot, I say a lot, I've heard this from him, and I've also heard it from the No Direction podcast, who are the official, like one of the really big official kind of Paizo kind of let's play, talk about, and generally kind of, you know, let's be clear, like me, waffle about our favourite hobby. And one of the guys on that show has literally like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands, I can't remember the exact phrase he used, but like a huge amount of time like immersed in the 2E Pathfinder experience. I already know he has more time immersed in Pathfinder 2E than I do. And he probably has more time immersed than Cody does. He talks about how he's gamed for a solid year with 2 whole parties. Now, I've gained a little bit longer than Cody in Pathfinder 2E, but that doesn't really matter. That's not a measuring stick for anything other than time, which anyone can do if they have time and spend it. You know, I could probably win an award for the most amount of, naff, war documentaries watched. Doesn't mean anything. It's arbitrary. So that's not a measure stick for anything. But what's more important is about making the experience more positive. And I think if he then takes a view and kind of perhaps dials back some of that emotion from the experience and looks at it and says, well, actually, maybe, I have burnt out because none of us enjoyed the adventure path. None of us enjoyed the story it was telling us, because that's a really important thing. There's a very strong distinction between homebrew and adventure path. An adventure path is telling you, even as the GM, a story. It is arbitrating it to you because it is a book with a story in it that goes from its start to its middle to its end. And as much as most people will be like, oh yeah, but I can just do this, or oh yeah, I can just do that, there's plenty of people that won't. And I think maybe Cody fell into that pitfall of letting it and having a trust and a faith in it doing the right thing for his particular party. No adventure path can be perfectly tailored to every single party that sits down and opens that book and plays that experience. One of the, I think, the joys of adventure paths from other people's kind of discussions about them is how they do feel that they can experience certain parts of it in slightly different ways. But at the end of the day, you will still go from its first encounter to its last encounter, and it will advance you down its story because that's its job. Whereas when you're homebrewing, you have the freedom and the remit for your party and you as a GM to just keep moving pieces around and making better fits and listening to kind of players and kind of going, well, I could slap some of that on, or I could pull some of that back, or I can change this and tweak that and add this and take that out and throw more of that or less of that at them just whenever I want and however I want, because you have complete kind of authoritative narrative control. So I guess my plea would be to Cody at Talking 20, please don't quit Pathfinder 2E because you had some bad experiences, and have a break, have a chill, have a relax, do some other shit. I swore, my bad. But come back to it and do something that you want to do from the ground up, from the get-go with it, because no role-playing system is perfect. I've already mentioned that I don't particularly enjoy 5e. I'd still play it if someone turned up that I knew and was just like, I've got this really cool idea for a campaign, but I want to use 5e. I'm not going to be like, no. I'm going to be like, okay, cool. Could I do this? Could I do that? Could I do the other? Bit of back and forth. Everyone's got characters. Let's sit down and roll some dice and have some fun. Happy days. And I think that's really important. You shouldn't just arbitrate so extremely, especially when you're on really shaky ground, such as the unbelievable statement, you cannot and will not ever roleplay, and the DM will never talk in the first person whilst playing Pathfinder 2e, because literally last night I completely shattered that illusion. And one of the things that was quite refreshing to see from the comments on that video were lots of other people popped that bubble real quick. Another talking point he made was combat is repetitive in the way that players will choose successful options that they have built out of their classes to achieve victory, which means they might use the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, again, not to be too flamey, but having played a huge amount of 3.5 and a huge amount of Pathfinder 1, when you're the fighter or the barbarian and you constantly make attack rolls, it's an attack roll and you're making an attack, right? If I counted the amount of times that I rolled an attack roll with a greatsword or a longsword or a magical +1 mace with whatever it had on it, or shot a bow over and over and over and over and over again, which is the vast majority of combat, if you're not a spellcaster, right? The notion that Pathfinder 2e is an exception and in its entirety alone in its repetitive nature of combat? Really? You think? Like, go and play another RPG and tell me how many times you use the word, I make an attack roll. Because you'll use that anytime there's combat. I'll attack them with my longsword. Why? My character has a longsword and I need to attack them with it. Because it's a combat and that's what I do. Or I'm going to shoot them with magic missile. Why? Because I have the magic missile spell and I have to use it to attack them because it's a fight and I need to attack them. That again, however, rolls back to a consideration I had of a subtext of that statement. If there's too much combat and you're not giving people time to role play at the table and will build an adventure and create and craft and storytell, everyone is going to get bored. You do need to have a good balance of back and forth between high stakes drama combat, low key kind of throwaway, look at you being heroic combat, low pressure combat, if you like, and then world building, shopping, crafting, role playing, sitting in a tavern telling war stories, all the fluff and kind of background kind of details that make stories. Because Lord of the Rings is kind of a go-to on this, and so is Star Wars. When you look at those kind of stories from start to finish, there are periods of high drama and tension, periods of kind of sacrifice and heroism, but there are also plenty of fireside stories and interesting characters they meet along the way, and subplots and side stories and romances and lots of other little things that kind of pop off all the way through the story that enrich the experience and make it worthwhile and credible. So yeah, don't quit on us, Cody. Keep playing Pathfinder 2e. And if you want, me to run you a homebrew game where you can do what you want and be what you want and have fun based on a homebrew game where we move pieces around and make stuff fit and change things and role play and talk in the first person as characters, mate, I'm in. Like, so in. I'd love to run a game for you. So that's genuine, by the way. Like, I'm not going to, it doesn't have to be streamed. It doesn't have to be, put online as a documentary of this is how you should Pathfinder 2. Because again, any role-playing game is down to what you and your group want to do at the table. And I just get the feeling that maybe he and his group weren't doing what they wanted to do. They were doing what they felt they should be doing. And that doesn't work. He's kind of proven that to himself. So take a chill, take a break, right? Recharge your juices with naff D&D inspiring movies like 13th Warrior. Solid gold D&D movie right there. The Mandalorian, you're not telling me that's not an adventure of a group of adventurers adventuring in Star Wars in a role-playing game? Come on, let's be honest, it is, isn't it? Recharge your batteries, come back to Pathfinder 2e and do something you want to do as a group together, and you'll find that it's a great system and it works perfectly well, and that you'll have fun and that you'll do loads of really cool stuff in it. And that really is the nub of this video, I think. I think right there is probably where I'm going to call it. Chill out, recharge your batteries, come back and do something you want to do with Pathfinder 2e, and don't believe your own hype. Because you and I both know, deep down, the statement "you can't roleplay in Pathfinder 2e" was a bit silly. But it's cool. You were on a bad day, you'd had a bad time, and you wanted to vent. So hopefully you've vented now and you feel a lot better. Stay safe, stay well, stay classy, and I will catch you on the next video. Because now I'm going to go off and watch No Nats's response to Talking 20, see what he has to say. Because he's another good YouTuber. I'll pop some links down to the videos in question, because I'm sure No Nats will be super positive and he'll be much like me, kind of like, don't leave, keep playing, and we'll go from there. Take care, everybody, and I will catch you on the next video. Peace.